Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October Q&A. It's been a little while since I've had a Q&A. I missed September's because I was out of the country, but I'm glad to be here tonight and glad to see so many amazing people in the chat already. We've got Lynn So Imperfect and my Nancy Cox from the quilt crew there. Lisa Gervais, I'm going to say your name wrong. I can never remember if it's Lisa or Lisa, or I know there's a little bit twist on it. Please forgive me and just remind me again. We've got Nell from the crew, and boy, lots and lots of great people. I just want to give a shout out of support. I don't know really much more that I can do than that to the people of North Carolina and Florida. You're in our thoughts. I'm sure there's people here on the list that will have more of an idea of where, if there's going to be a quilt initiative for any of these groups, or if there's going to be a donation hub or something that we can lend our funds for, because I know that they're going to need money long before they need a quilt. If you could just put those links in the chat, I'm sure all of us would really appreciate that kind of direction. The pictures that we've been seeing online are just horrific, and I can only imagine being in that type of situation, how hard it must be. And so many people haven't even heard from their families, so they don't know. But anyways, on a happier note, I am glad to be back. We had a absolutely wonderful trip to the Netherlands and Belgium. It was all that I could have hoped it could be. It was just so nice. I cannot tell you how wonderful it was. I'm not sure if there's anybody in the chat that went on it with me, but they can agree. We all just had such a fabulous time. We had beautiful weather, beautiful sights, met wonderful people, and all is, I can't wait to do something like that again. We've got a number of questions in the chat already, and we've got some that people had sent in ahead of time. So I'm just going to start with the first couple. Sandra Kingsbury has asked, can you talk about quilt donations after a disaster? Well, I've already kind of broached on it. I find the best is to wait for someone from that area or with direct contacts to the area, just so they have a logistics way of getting the quilts to the right person in the right place. Some people will volunteer at the beginning and then they don't really understand how big a commitment it can be. I know we had a tragedy here in Saskatchewan a number of years ago, and a quilt shop volunteered to do it, and I think it took her 2 years to get all the donations quilted. That's a colossal amount of effort and a huge donation of time, very generously, to a community that needed it. I remember reading about the incident in Florida where the shooting in the nightclub happened. And there was a woman who had, I believe she had Army experience as a quartermaster, but she was able to channel all that logistics and get it where it needs to go. I was just speaking with Quilts for Survivors up north in Timmins, and Vanessa, who runs that organization, it took her a couple of tries. One, she was surprised by the generosity. She was aiming to just donate 18 quilts, and she just is at her 6,000th quilt. So she has a big organization, or a bigger organization now. She has more equipment at her disposal. There's various lieutenants that have appeared on the sidelines helping get quilts to where they need to go. So just wait for that. It may not be available this week, But in the coming weeks, there will be somebody or a group of somebodies that step up, whether it be a collection of the guilds nearby or a collection of just people that have the ability to get things where they need to be. And as I said, they need your money before they need your quilt. So if you've got anything you can donate, I always like to donate to the Red Cross, but I'm sure that there's other places that you can donate that can get into the hands of people that need it. And that's what I follow. That's what I tend to do. I look for the person nearest to the disaster, and I make a quilt. Nadine Peterson, 6321, has said, I've inherited a large pile of 2.5-inch squares. What can I do with them? I'm not quite sure of your skill level, but personally, I would probably just sew them together in we call them postage stamp quilts. Sometimes postage stamp quilts are referred to as smaller squares, but excuse me, if you're just doing blocks, make them either 16 or 25 per block. That way you can work at them in stages, and they're perfect for using as leaders and enders. So you don't need to sit down and make the quilt right now. You can just make it over time, being that first fabric that goes underneath your needle. I personally not only use them as leaders, I also use them to mark in between things or trying not to break my thread. I just want to have a continuous flow of the thread. So I'll just use those as spacers. But it's a great project to have. You've got 2.5-inch. I don't know what the selection are, whether it's a combination of styles and values. I know I was just, when I first started doing 2.5-inch squares, I tried just doing a high value with a low value. But I found as I went on, I got much more enjoyment when I made ones out of 2 similar colors. And then I made 4 patches out of them. And then I put those 4 patches together. So, what are your, Amy Lynn, 1345 has asked, what are your favorite marking tools for long arm quilting? Also, favorite batting to get on a big roll. My favorite tools, I've got the little dude. I've got that little orange little dude from Silly Moon Quilting. That has made a big difference in my accuracy, in that I use it to mark that 1/4 inch, so I know exactly where my foot needs to be, whether it be on straight lines or just going across. I saw Kelly using it one day, and I never thought of it that way. I always thought that was for figuring out your 1/4 inch seam on the sewing machine, but it's been a very valuable tool for my long arm. The marking tools is just I bought it on Amazon. I think it's a no-name, but it's just the disappearing ink one. So if it's exposed to humidity, the color goes away, which is sometimes a little challenging on a humid day, but that's what I like. Favorite batting to get on a big roll. So my last ones that I've received, I've gone with Hobbs batting. That's the brand name. But truly, the one that what I'm looking for is 100% cotton. I have done a couple of different widths, but my machine has a limit of basically 100 inches. I can go a little bit more than that, so that's the size of batting that I'm getting now. I tried 80/20, and there was nothing against the batting itself, but I found the small polyester fibers in it irritated my eyes. So that's me. I have dry eyes on the best day, so I avoid that. I also like wool on a roll. I just don't use wool batting enough. I've decided to just do cotton. I'm trying to find the one with the biggest loft. I have to go in and take a look at it. I don't know the name off the bat, but I've just used up all my batting, so I'm actually on the hunt for a new roll myself. Sometimes you can catch one of the big box stores will have a sale on batting, so I would take advantage of that if I had access to it as well. Hazel has asked from my quilt crew, are you planning to go to Quiltcon in Phoenix? Yes, I am. I already have my room. I already have my plane. I'm going Monday to Monday. I usually like to arrive early. I give myself a day of nice treatment. I usually get my nails done. I usually have a mani-pedi or a massage. And I like to go about and just do some shopping for myself. Not fabric shopping, just clothing shopping if I can. And yeah, just have a nice day. And then I try to volunteer one day. And then, you know, I start meeting up with people and helping people out. So and then we roll into QuiltCon itself. So. Carmen Bailey says, I'm starting to see more videos about using school glue when sandwiching or binding quilts. What are your thoughts about this method? I am not a person that fusses with binding. I guess there's a little bit of judgment in fussy, and I don't mean it that way. I know some people really, really enjoy getting perfect binding. I am not a person that does that. I have a method, I think it works pretty darn well, and I've done it in my binding videos, of how to put binding on. I don't find I need glue. And I'm not sure if they're doing that to avoid like they're machine quilting it and they just want that line of stitching to be perfect on the front and back or not. But anytime you put glue on anything, you have a risk of gumming up your needle. So that's another reason why I have a tendency to stay away from those type of glues. I know there's people that are putting glue in spray bottles or they're just using that instead of spray glue for binding their, for sandwiching their quilts. I don't know. I know school glue is supposed to be washable and things like that, but and that might be a cheaper solution in the short run, but I still think it's going to gum up your needle. And I don't know what will happen if you get a good big glob on somewhere. So I have not tried it. I've not experimented with it. So my opinion is just from an arm's length away and whether I would ever attempt to do it. So. Okay, so somebody says they're having problems with my sound, so just give me a second here. I can't turn that with my thumb. Here we go. Can you hear me a little bit better now? I've got my sound up as much as I can do it, so that's it. I'm going to put this off to the side so it's not in my head. And here we go. Okay, somebody was saying they just watched my older video, 6 ways to keep my quilt sandwich together, and was wondering if you use the flannel side of the batting as your back. No, it's not. I guess you could. It's white, and there are some seams where it is sewn to the batting to keep the 2 layers together, but I did not. I actually liked the extra weight of that extra layer within the quilt. And the person that I gave it to gave the quilt to it, loves it too. And I know I gave it to my mom, and I know my mom and dad fight over it because they really like the weight of that quilt. So, yeah. Lynn's So Imperfect from my crew. What's the deal with my right hand? Okay, so I came home from Holland, and then I had to go up north to Timmins. I was the guest speaker or the guest instructor at their annual Quilts for Survivors retreat. It was 4 days of making quilts. It was just incredible how many quilts they made. But on the very first day, I was looking at their new location and I stepped through a door and I didn't realize there was a step down on the other side. And I took a pretty nasty tumble. I am very surprised I didn't break anything because I was so black and blue. But I still have an issue with my thumb. I'm pretty well back to normal. There's still a little bit of swelling on my foot. But my biggest issue is I cannot put any weight on my thumb. So anytime I have to do a pincer move, like turning a knob, it's been interesting what I can do and what I can't do. And I have to move over to my left hand. The bizarre thing about me is that my body is totally left-sided except for my hand. And I think that's because I was born with a really dominant right eye. And that forced me, or just the way my brain was wired, I started using my right hand for printing. Though I've always had a death grip on my pen, and I have the very same thing with my needles and everything, and I've got to be really careful just to relax. So I've been experimenting what is easy with my left hand that I can do. And some things are not too bad. It seems I cannot brush my teeth with my with this thumb in this condition, so I had to brush my teeth with my left hand, but I can still floss with this hand. But it's just, I just have to be really careful. I can do anything as long as my wrist is straight, and like I can, do a sit-up, not a sit-up, a push-up or a plank, as long as I do my, keep it on my knuckles. The minute that my thumb comes out, I have issues. So there's the long answer for that one. Vicky Lacroix says, how do you store my pantographs so that you quickly find the one you want to use? I've tried a spreadsheet, but it's not working for me. Let me see if I can pull up a picture of what I use. Do I have it there? No, it didn't come through. Let me see if it's here. There we go. Oh, here it is. So this is how I store mine. They're in a bucket. They're in my island here. And I just bought this X, but you could do that with foam board if you wanted to. And I just categorize them. They're 3 different buckets based on size. And I always roll them so that the name of the pantograph is on the outside. Now, that's what works for me. You may have a different situation. You may have thousands more. I know there's some experienced long armors that have over 100 pantographs. So it just is how it works for you, and how, do you want to categorize them A, B, C? You mentioned that you tried a spreadsheet, but it's not working for you. But you can put different color elastics on them, so you know what you're looking for. Really what you're trying to do is get the decisions, the checking that you have to do down. So if you know you're doing maple leaves, maybe you have a group of fall ones, or foliage, things like that. And then you have another one of kitty, or maybe another one of just plain shapes like flames or serpentines or whatever. Just find those categories. Use either divide them or just put different markings on them. I don't really know how much more. I don't really know how much more to answer that question. I just really just take a look at what you have and what your space is, and maybe do you need them all? Maybe you don't need as many as you think you do. So. W. Summers has asked, how do you suggest a beginner practice cutting yardage, especially 2.5-inch strips? Okay, so there's 2 things with cutting. So I have 2 videos on how to use your rotary cutter. One is how to cut straight, and the other one is 10 cutting mistakes and how to use your rotary cutter properly. The biggest mistake that new cutters make when they're doing those 2-inch strips is that they're aligning their ruler with the selvages when you need to align it with the fold. Your lines need to be, depending on what line you're looking at, one needs to be parallel and the other one needs to be perpendicular with your fold. And that's how you cut your 2.5-inch strips. But there is technique involved in it. Many people don't use good technique. I know there's many times when I get lazy and I don't use good technique, but find yourself some old fabric, whether they be old sheets or old shirts or whatever, and just practice. Figure out what works, what lines work for you. Depending on your ruler, you may want to align your visual line with one of the lines, like the outside of the line or the inside of the line, or the left side of the line. You also need to be mindful that your rotary cutter is straight. And just check out those 2 videos because it really explains pretty well everything you need to know. But the last thing is make sure you're working with a sharp blade. There's nothing that ruins your technique faster than when it's dull and you have to dig it in. It puts wear and tear on your cutting mat. It puts wear and tear on your wrist. And, it's just so much harder to cut well with a dull blade. I'm not sure. I know I've shown a couple of times how to sharpen your blades. It's one of the Quilt Coach videos, but maybe I'll do a short on it because so many people ask about how to use those rotary blade sharpeners. And I do use one, and it makes things last a lot longer. Cecilia has asked, I need some instructions on how to use the freezer paper to applique a square. Unfortunately, that is not something that I can explain in a Q&A. I don't know whether you've looked at other people in their videos. I know there's a lot of quilters out there that applique is their specialty, and they would probably be the better people to teach you how to do that. So just Google it. I'm sure you'll find some good blogs or videos about that. Louisa S. has asked, I was watching your Let's Talk About Stripology with Gundren Erica, and you stated that you see the difference between modern and traditional quilting as the approach, but you didn't explain what you meant by it. I've said this a couple of times, but basically it's only my own definition of it, because there's the modern quilting world and there is the traditional quilting world. And there's a lot of overlap between the two of them. And there's also the fiber art community and the people who are artists or aspire to be artists. And they have their own words. And when you hear modern used in a piece of artwork or to describe a quilt, that's not really what I'm getting at here. I'm talking about the community. What forms the community of modern quilters and what forms the community of traditional quilting? So when I say the approach, I say traditional quilters like to take a quilting class. They want to figure out how to do things. They like following a pattern, and they incrementally improve their skills. And as they get better, they branch off into different ideas and different techniques and explore different things and get bolder and bolder as they go. Where a modern quilter has seen something or has had an idea or they have something in mind and they want to make it, but they don't necessarily have the skill to do it. So when I mean the approach is modern quilter often starts off with the idea and the results that they're looking for, and they're constantly trying to improve their skills so that they can execute that idea. Whereas a traditional quilter starts off with the skills and they build them up, and as they build their skills, then they find the opportunities for different ideas and different execution. So it's just a different way of acquiring skill. One with the idea and bringing skills up. So you may not fill in the blanks in a nice, tidy order. You fill in the blanks as needs be, where a traditional quilter probably is learning from parents or others, or they've taken a class, or there's somebody else that they know that's a quilter and they have somebody that's bringing them up, and then they go off, whether they want to do Judy Niemeyer quilts or they go off into applique Baltimore quilts, or there's just so many different ways you can go off, but they start with going off in those different directions with a big toolbox full of skill. Yeah. Gladys, one of my favorite people, has just jumped in with a comment. Invest if you have the money in the stripology ruler. It's great if you know you're going to be doing a lot of strips. It takes a little getting used to, and it's pricey, but it's worth it. Yeah. Somebody has asked, do I go to the AQS show in Paducah? I have not. And I'm not sure if I'm going to have time next year either. It's going to be a busy fall, busy first half of the year for me. So that may have to be a 2026, but I do want to get there. It's on my bucket list of quilt shows that I do want to get to. Nancy Cox, another one of my favorite people. While doing straight line quilting, intermittently tension goes from good to a section of bad tension and back to good. I ordered a new walking foot to see if that's it. It has been serviced. Any other suggestions? You might take a look at the type of thread that you're using. If it's still happening with different types of thread, you never know. There could be a bad spot. Maybe there was a spot on your spool where it was exposed to heat or sun, or maybe it was sprayed with glue or something like that. I think you've mentioned this before. I think you've mentioned that you've had this mystery tension issue. Tension is your thread path, your thread, your needle, and your sewing machine. So it's hard to believe that your sewing machine would have it intermittently. So I would look for something external. Maybe take a look at that thread. Deborah Stantz has said, I pin base and I use a walking foot, but I keep getting puckers on the top. Any suggestion? I find the most problematic way of sandwiching a quilt for me is pinning. I find it very tricky. I find no matter how flat I pin it, except for baby quilts, there's always a pucker that it will appear here and there. When I've done it, I'm not sure if you've seen my video on 6 ways to sandwich a quilt, but I found that when I pinned it on one side and then I flipped it over, it was very puckery on the back, and I would have to go through section by section and make sure they were all flat. And I pinned, and sometimes I would even just go through with a very loose basting stitch just to keep layers from shifting with each other. But that's the way it happened to work for me. You can take a look at how you're doing it with your walking foot. Are you doing it from one end to the other? Are you starting in the middle of the quilt and working out? Or are you, it could be the way that you're attacking with your walking foot, the strategy that you're using. So I would always start with the middle. I would always quilt from one side to the other side. Don't turn your work around and come back. Just start back from the same side and keep your lines going in the same direction. If you're doing them on diagonals, the same thing. I would start in that one corner and work down one side, all from top to bottom, so that the bulk is always being pushed out the one way. Don Schneider has asked, do you store your spools with your bobbins of same colors or have another method? I rarely have more than 3 bobbins going at one time. I have a couple of specialty bobbins. I've got a 40 weight bobbin. I don't often use 40 weight thread in my bobbin, but I just have that one. I have a specialty thread. What is it? Iron. It's one of the wonderful ones where you it melts. It melts. So I have a bobbin with just that in it, and I have another bobbin in it with the wash away thread by Wonderful. Then I have a white or cream. I have a dark, whether it be navy, black, or brown, and then I have a mid-tone that I'm working with, and that's just what I do. I rarely have more than that. And on my long arm, I'm now using pre-wound bobbins. I find I like, they work really well on my machine. I really like the results. And I think I've got 7 colors, and I keep them here, and I just have a little tray, and I just keep working through the oldest one. I keep the half ones there, and I'll end up using them in the next quilt that I use that color for. Yeah. Laugh Ootley says, what is your opinion on putting a label on a quilt? Do you use laundry instructions, or you just list a date and a maker information? So I have a video on making a quilt label. I think it's very important to make one. That has changed in the time that I've been quilting. When I first started, I thought I was not good enough, or I thought my quilt wasn't special enough. But I have since realized that this is part of my legacy, these quilts that I send out to people that I love and I care for. And I just want a little note of where the quilt came from and why. So sometimes if it's not going to anyone in particular, I'll just put a name on it. If it's going to someone in particular, I'll usually put the reason why and who it's going to, and the date. And occasionally, I think most of the time I put my name on it. I don't put just get it done quilts most of the time. Most of the time I just say quilted piece or bound by Karen Brown, just depending on where I was. Yeah. So I do try to always put a label on, and I am now going back over my old quilts and putting labels on them as I find them. Taxi Bella has asked, what's my favorite template to use? I don't know which one you're talking about. Are you talking about a template for quilting or a template for piecing? You can just answer that in the chat, and then I can... Oh, hello. I love seeing Friesland. Friesland was quite the surprise. Friesland, for those that don't know it, is a part of the Netherlands. It's kind of just a little pocket. It's near the German border on the Atlantic. And yeah, it was interesting. And Sugary Dew, Irene from Sugary Dew, had a little bit of, her husband is from Friesland, and she just gave us a little bit of background on people who speak it and how proud the Frieslanders are of their heritage and their culture. And I was able to see how it also, where that personality is landed in Canada. The Friesland horses and the cattle and things like that. I can all see traces of that here in Ontario. Divine Love has asked, any words of advice to help you find your SOJO? Well, SOJO is when you're burnt out, right? You just don't have the get up and go. Your brain is exhausted. So your brain needs rest if that's the problem. or you need to figure out where it's burning itself out. Is it burning itself out at work? Are you dealing with a death in the family or even an illness in the family? Are you yourself sick or ill? But I've done a number of videos on mental health. I talk about things that you can do to help you get ready to sew again. Part of the problem can be that the projects that you were doing were too big and you can't load all the information back inside your head. So I would recommend going to your sewing room, use your timer, do what you can. If it's only 5 minutes at a time, just do 5 minutes at a time, and just unearth your sewing machine. And then play with your fabrics a bit. You don't have to commit to make anything, but just maybe fold them, maybe tidy them, maybe reorganize them. And that can often get some juices flowing as well. But I do caution you not to take on a big project too soon. Make sure that you're working in small chunks, because we all have a tendency, the moment that we feel better, just to dive into it, and we do nothing but burn ourselves out again. So just take a moment and just figure out if there's something that you can remove from your life that's causing you too much stress, and where you can bring the sewing back into your life in small chunks. Kim M has asked, what is my opinion of rehydrating threads? I don't have many old threads in my stash anymore, and personally it feels like an awful lot of work for the payback it gives. I have bought in quilting especially, because if you're folding to the side, if you press to the dark side, you don't really need to worry about thread color the way that you need to do in garment sewing. So I just I don't work with thousands of colors of threads, even though I actually have a lot of different spools. I've got to remind myself that I do have access to those. But for me, that's my opinion. I just think there's better uses of my time than rehydrating my thread. There's things that you can use old thread for that experiment. Kids can play with it and do different things like that, but I just wouldn't waste my time on rehydrating for when I like to play with the color. I like to play with the piecing. Yeah. So I just realized there's a couple of people in the room that I know. We've got Suzette, Betsy, Pearl Evans. Pearl, your grandchild is coming soon. I saw Despina the other day. She is very big. Oh, she's so small. I don't know how I don't know how big that baby's going to be. Pearl, I'm not sure if you know this from past Q&As, but my son and her son share the same home. And her son and partner are expecting a child. It's going to be exciting. We've got Marty here. We've got Jean, and we've got Melkamack. I'm just jumping through there. Anyways, before we go any farther, I have a couple of things to talk about, to show you. Where is that? Is it here? Nope. Okay, where are my stuff? Here we go. There they are. Okay, so if you haven't seen it yet, this is a summary of our tour in the Netherlands. It's a highlight reel. Unfortunately, there's just not enough time to share everything, but I think it's not too bad. And this wonderful graphic on the thumbnail here, we picked up in the fabric market in Utrecht. It's this pop art version of the girl with a pearl earring, and it was just it was panels that you could cut out and make a bag. And you can see here I've already done it. I really enjoyed it. Before I left for the Netherlands, my video was finishing off. You can see that I've finished some big projects there. The one on the bottom is my new hexagon Millefiore. That's a big EPP quilt, I should say. I think it took me 7 years to make. And there's 3 there that are backed with minky of different weights, like fillings, different fillings in them for an experiment that I'm doing. And then the other one is my postcards from Toronto. So if anybody, I have my background here with a quilt that's very similar to it. That's the one in the picture there. And so if you ever want to make one of those HST quilts, there's the methodology for you. On Karen's Quilt Circle, we had Stephanie Sobing. Somebody tells me I'm pronouncing that last name wrong. Sobing. I apologize if I am. And she is just talking about her life, and she's had to deal with some mental health issues. So I admire her courage in coming online and talking to us about them. I also had the opportunity to talk with the Sew Tights ladies about everything magnetic, talking about how they came up with their idea for Sew Tights and a couple of other projects that they're working on. You've seen the magnetic cutting system. How did they, what supports did they need to get in place? How have they been able to take advantage of some mentoring and each other? And I just love talking to them. They were great to see. And coming up next week on Friday is our live Q&A about my next trip, my next cruise. It's called The Best of Scandinavia. This is a 13-night cruise, May 9th to 22nd in 2025. So if you have any questions, certainly make sure we have them before then. Even if you're not able to make the Q&A, it will be recorded and you can watch it later. Our next Q&A is on November 5th. And if you are in my quilt crew, the next meeting is not this Sunday. We have Canadian Thanksgiving, so it's just been postponed to the next week after that. Something that came up in my my questions today was people are looking for a roommate for the cruise, or how is it getting a roommate? How difficult is it? I've been on 6 trips now, and out of all the pairings that have happened, I've only had one where it was a failure. I'm not quite sure why, but the other pairings have just been so wonderful to watch how a friendship develops between these roommates. But you have to interview each other beforehand. So how it works is we have a Facebook group for each one of the trips, and you can look for friends there, or we ask you permission if we can share your email. So if somebody else who's single, who's looking for a partner comes online, we can share your email with them. But it's up to you to make that decision as to whether you want to room with that person. We're adults. You can make that decision on your own. So we don't throw people together. It's only if you want to take advantage of a roommate that you do that. But as I said, I've seen nothing. I've always been shocked that people have just met the day that they get on the boat, because after about 4 days, you're going, are you sure? You never knew each other before, because they really look like they're good friends. Yeah. So I think do we have time for one last question? Let me just see whether we've got one here. Do I have a video on repairing the border after the top was quilted? No, I don't. You'd probably have to be a little bit more specific about it, but I am working on a border video. So if you want to email me at info@justgetitdonequilts.com, get a little bit more specific, and then I can cover it in the video on borders. Chris King says, I have a problem with my wool mat where it produces a brown area. It is using steam in my iron. Is it using steam in my iron? Is it lanolin from the wood? Any suggestions, please? Yes, you're not supposed to use steam with the wool mats. One of the reasons is because the steam is actually going right through the wool mat into the surface underneath. So if you've got a wooden table or another surface, it can warp or be stained by all that heat coming through. I've had brown patches on my wool mat come through, but I've never had a problem with that darkness being transferred to something I was quilting. So I haven't had a problem with them smelling. I haven't had a problem, but they do discolor with heat. And it quite likely is the lanolin. I really cannot give you a firm answer on that because I'm really not sure what it is. But just use a spritz bottle instead of steaming your iron, and you can get really good results. Anyways, so I think that's it for tonight. Thank you very much. I want to give a shout out to Gina in the background, who's been helping everybody in the chat and just moderating the questions for me. It has really, that's really, really helpful, and I really appreciate it. And thank you to all my quilt crew members that have shown up. Your continued support is really very special for me. So let me see, where are we now? So I'm working on a new video this week, a new stash buster. So keep tuned. It's going to be about potato chip blocks. So I know everybody's quite crazy about them right now. So I hopefully will see you next month, if not before. So take care, everyone.